Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the books and ideas that have defined culture and, well, we pull them apart until we find the surprising history and hidden connections. Today, we are getting into Harper Lee's monumental classic, To Kill a Mockingbird, and the shocking revelation that came later with its first draft, Go Set a Watchman. I mean, we're talking about arguably the most widely read American novel of the 20th century. It won a Pulitzer in '61, sold over 40 million copies.
Yeah.
It's just foundational. Everyone thinks they know this story.
But that's the thing, isn't it? That familiarity means we often miss the complexity. Our mission today is to really go beyond the syllabus summary. We're going to explore the craftsmanship that turned a messy first draft into this beloved classic, specifically how Lee used ideas of courage and social othering, and then we're going to dissect how the publication of that original manuscript, Go Set a Watchman, just fundamentally challenged the entire legacy of Atticus Finch, who for so long was the moral center of American fiction.
Okay, so let's set the scene. To Kill a Mockingbird. It's set in this fictional, racially segregated town, Macomb, Alabama, and the time period is the Great Depression, so roughly 1933 to 35. And it's kind of two things at once, right? Southern Gothic, but it's also Bildungsroman, a coming-of-age story.
And we absolutely have to anchor this historically. The book was written and published right at the boiling point of the American Civil Rights Movement. It hit shelves in 1960, so it's tackling racial injustice, class, innocence, all while the nation is debating school integration and voting rights. I mean, publishing a book with a white hero standing against Southern bigotry, that was a profoundly political act at that moment.
And the way she did it is just brilliant, filtering this explosive content through a safer lens.
Yeah.
Talking about Scout Finch's voice, we see everything through her first-person perspective, which lets Lee blend the view of a 6-year-old with the wisdom of a woman looking back.
That combination is the key. It really is. It gives the book its persuasive power. By filtering these really difficult adult issues, rape, systemic racism, through a child's eyes, Lee kind of disarms the reader. You naturally accept Scout's simpler moral compass, which lets these challenging themes land without it just becoming another political argument.
Right, and the idea that holds all that moral reasoning together is the mockingbird symbol itself. That line from Miss Maudie, it's a sin to kill a mockingbird because they're innocent.
And that symbolizes characters defined by their vulnerability, like Tom Robinson and, of course, the mysterious Boo Radley. But wait, before we move on, let's talk about the trial. The Tom Robinson trial. This is where Atticus's legal skill is supposed to conquer Macomb's prejudice.
Okay, yeah. So that leads us to the courtroom, where Atticus uses forensic evidence. He proves, pretty conclusively, that Mayella Ewell's injuries, a blacked right eye, bruises on the right side of her face, had to have come from a left-handed attacker. And Bob you.
Her father was left-handed. Judge Taylor even notes it. And Tom Robinson couldn't have done it. His left arm was, as the book says, useless, completely mangled in a cotton gin accident. So the logic is it's crystal clear.
But isn't that almost too neat? Does the fact that Atticus relies on this clear scientific proof, which should have been a slam dunk, doesn't that just highlight how deep Macomb's prejudice really is? The evidence was perfect, but the jury convicted him anyway?
It absolutely does. The conviction shows that the prejudice in Macomb isn't based on facts. It's a structural failure embedded in the community's code. The town's unspoken rule, forbidding a relationship between a white woman and a black man, was so powerful it just superseded the actual rule of law. The facts didn't matter. The social fear won.
That fear, that inability to see past social lines, it brings us to Atticus's famous quote. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view. How does the novel take that idea of othering beyond just race?
Well, what's so fascinating is how Lee shows prejudice working on multiple fronts. It's not just race or class, it's about how Macomb defines normal, and anything different is immediately pushed to the margins. So the whole process of othering extends to physical impairments, to people who defy social norms.
Like Mrs. Dubose and Tom Robinson.
Exactly. Tom Robinson's physical disability, his useless arm, that's a key part of his identity, and ultimately the core of his defense. And with Mrs. Dubose, she's an outcast because of her crippling morphine addiction. Yet her struggle to quit before she dies, a battle she knew she was licked before she began, becomes Atticus's central lesson on what real courage is.
And then you have the ultimate outsider, Boo Radley.
Boo is the extreme example of this. He has what scholars call a spoiled identity. His reputation is completely corrupted by gossip and legend, mostly from Stephanie Crawford's stories. He's this absent presence in town.
Neighborhood boogeyman, basically. But his whole story forces you to rethink who the truly human characters are, right?
Yes. The kids slowly start to see his secret humanity as they challenge their own fear. The little gifts in the tree, the blanket he puts on Scout during the fire. And then he emerges to save them from Bob Ewell. He becomes the real knight in shining armor, and it forces you to realize that the most abnormal person in town is actually the most innocent.
And Atticus has a name for this whole problem, for Maycomb's behavior. He calls it Maycomb's usual disease.
That phrase from Chapter 9, it's a direct critique of the town's racism and bigotry. The social fear that Atticus is fighting, it's symbolized by that rabid, mad dog he has to shoot. It represents this panic of being infected by difference. So Maycomb builds these social boundaries to fight that fear, and Atticus's job, as he sees it, is to stand alone against that infection.
You know, speaking of standing alone, for so many people, the 1962 film with Gregory Peck is Atticus Finch. They skip the book entirely, so we should probably look at what that adaptation loses, especially since it shifts away from the novel's intimate voice.
Oh, that narrative shift is monumental. The film is mostly third person, so it has to shift the emotional focus to Atticus and the adult political struggles. The book's real strength is that conversational first-person voice from Scout. So the film makes Atticus the clear main character, whereas in the book it's really about Scout's moral growth.
So by focusing on the adult story, the film ends up cutting out the characters and conflicts that actually teach Scout about empathy. Wait, the film gets rid of the whole relationship between Jem and Miss DeZavos.
Gone.
But that's where he learns what real courage is. It removes the whole emotional framework that connects Tom Robinson's defense to a bigger moral lesson.
It's a huge loss, a pivotal one. And the film minimizes other critical parts too. For instance, Aunt Alexandra is basically cut out, which removes the whole conflict over gender roles and Scout being a tomboy.
Which is a huge part of her coming-of-age story.
Even the little conflict with Miss Caroline, her teacher, is gone, and that's what first introduces the idea of seeing things from another person's perspective.
Wow. And even in the big scenes they do keep, the symbolism gets watered down, like the mad dog scene.
Right. In the novel, shooting that dog spans 3 chapters. And it includes this powerful, often overlooked moment where Calpurnia runs way out of her way to warn the Radley family. That little act shows that Atticus's moral code extends beyond his own house. In the film, it's like, well, it's just a moment to show that Atticus is a good shot. It feels much more insignificant.
Okay, let's pivot. Let's talk about one of the biggest literary shakeups of the last, 20 years?
Yeah.
In 2015, Go Set a Watchman is published. It was marketed to everyone as a sequel, but now we pretty much accept it's the first draft of To Kill a Mockingbird, where she finished back in 1957.
And the controversy around its publication was it was intense. The manuscript was found in a safe deposit box, and there were allegations that the 89-year-old Harper Lee, who was nearly deaf and blind, was maybe pressured into releasing it. It was published with no foreword, no context, making it seem like a new, intentional book instead of what it was, a draft.
And we know now this was never meant to be published. Lee's editor, Tay Hohoff, found the original draft to be more a series of anecdotes than a fully conceived novel. She was the one who saw the potential in the childhood flashbacks and told Lee to build a new novel from those.
Hohoff basically created the hero we know. She forced that thematic pivot, and that pivot is exactly what makes the contents of Watchmen so agonizing for fans.
And this is where it gets really unsettling. In Watchmen, the story is set 20 years later. Jean-Louise Finch, who's now 26, comes back to Maycomb from New York, and her brother Jem is dead. But the real gut punch is what she discovers about her father.
Yeah. Jean-Louise discovers that her moral idol, Atticus Finch, is a segregationist. He attends a citizens' council meeting. He argues that black people aren't ready for full civil rights. This wasn't just some small difference of opinion. This was the icon of moral decency engaging in profoundly bigoted behavior.
So the very foundation of the original book, that idealized father-daughter relationship, Atticus, as the unwavering moral standard, it just dissolves. That must have been devastating for people who grew up idolizing him.
It was a collective gasp, a huge sense of disillusionment. TKM is a redemptive story. GSW is the opposite. It is all about painful, acute disillusionment. Jean-Louise realizes she had fastened her conscience to her father's, and her uncle has to explain that Atticus was letting her break her idols so she could finally see him as just a man.
So in a really strange way, Go Set a Watchman forces Jean-Louise and the reader to finally complete her own moral coming of age, which she never actually did in that first draft. She has to find her own conscience.
Exactly. The final message of GSW is that you have to claim your own moral autonomy. It tells the reader that idolizing anyone, even Atticus Finch, stops real moral growth. She had to welcome him to the human race, a flawed, prejudiced human race, to finally become an adult herself.
Now, we really need to address the modern context here. Even 60 years later, To Kill a Mockingbird is still one of the most frequently challenged and banned books. But the reasons, the arguments for removing it have completely changed.
They absolutely have. Back in the 60s and 70s, the challenges were about profanity, themes of rape, immorality. When one school board tried to ban it in 1966, Lee famously sent money to the local paper and told them to enroll in first grade to learn to read.
A perfect comeback. But today, the challenges are about race from a totally different angle.
That's right. Modern challenges now focus on the volume of racial slurs. The N-word is used 48 times, and the novel's entire perspective. The argument is that the language is traumatic for students, or that the book centers on whiteness, because the whole moral journey is filtered through a white narrator and focuses on a white savior.
That critique, the white savior complex, that the story relies on a good white man to save a black man, that's a really powerful point. How do we reconcile that with the book's historical importance?
It's a necessary conversation to have. I mean, the book is undeniably told from a white perspective, but its value has always been in its power to start these discussions about empathy and systemic failure. And, the discovery of GSW gives us the ultimate critical lens for that. It forces us to ask, was Atticus's defense of Tom Robinson really about justice for all, or was it just about an abstract principle of the law without any desire to actually change the racist status quo?
And the Atticus of Watchmen suggests it might be the latter. He was fighting for the law, maybe not for the elimination of Macomb's social code.
It encourages that critical reading. The two books, when you read them together, present a really complex challenge to simple moralizing. They show that social progress isn't just about legal action. It requires a painful, fundamental dismantling of these deeply prejudiced mindsets.
And that really is the lasting impact of having both versions of this story. Whether we see Atticus as the classic hero or the complex segregationist from the first draft, both novels just highlight this enduring struggle for justice.
Yeah, the takeaway isn't about which book is better. It's about what they teach us together. That the courage to challenge prejudice is always painful, it's often internal, and it frequently means accepting the imperfections of the people we admire most.
Atticus Finch told his children that most people are nice when you finally see them. We've talked about how the novel treated characters like Tom Robinson and Boo Radley, the real Mockingbirds, who got a spoiled identity from neighborhood legend instead of truth. So what societal or cultural Mockingbirds today are we failing to fully see, or defining by a narrative crafted by others? That's something for you to explore on your own.